Hi, everyone. As I mentioned, and I know as Anna mentioned, my name is Lauren Ryan. I'm a Government Affairs Director with AARP's Family Caregiving team, and I'm really, really excited to be here talking with all of you about caregiving and how we can alleviate some of the challenges that family caregivers face through financial relief like tax credits or reimbursement programs. I think, as I'm sure many of you already know, one of our top priorities is finding better ways to support family caregivers. Family caregivers help older parents, spouses, loved ones with everyday tasks or performing more complex nursing treatments, just so that they can live more independently at home where so many people want to be. We often talk about family caregivers as the backbone of the U.S. long-term care system. I think one of the stats we often say is 21% of Americans, or 53 million people, have served as a family caregiver to either an adult or a child with special needs in the last year. 19% of those, and that comes out to about 48 million people, are providing unpaid care to at least one adult. So it's something that we're really, really focused on. I think the other thing is we often talk about how caregivers provide significant benefits to both national and state economies. The 2023 Valuing the Invaluable study showed that in 2021 alone, America's family caregivers provided approximately 38 billion hours, with a B, of unpaid care, and an economic value of $600 billion. And in Alabama alone, there are about 700,000 caregivers providing an economic value of about $8.3 billion. So obviously we understand that economic value is really important. And I think the issue is also universal, right? We know that family caregivers come from all ages, races, ethnicities, and cut across all demographic and population segments. And it's something that's becoming more and more of an issue. I think there's more conversations around this. We're seeing it more in the news. We're hearing it more from policymakers. But I think one of the things. Sure. Okay. So, just despite those many benefits and their contributions to the economy, one of the things we talk about is the significant benefits, or the significant financial and physical challenges that family caregivers often face. I think, to help older loved ones cover expenses like home modification, respite care, home health aides, there's all of these other expenses. Family caregivers often have to tap into their own savings or cut back on their own health care, or reduce or even stop saving for their retirement. Every year, we know family caregivers on average spend more than a quarter of their income providing care for a loved one. And that again comes out to about $7,200 on average out of their own pockets. And one of the things you'll see on this slide is that differs a bit from different demographics. So African American family caregivers often spend a higher percentage of their income, as do Hispanic Latinos, and Asian Pacific Islanders often spend a higher amount of money. So it's something that cuts across every demographic, but different segments of the population might feel some of these challenges a little bit different. One of the things we also often want to talk about when it comes to economic challenges, it's not just the actual dollar amount. We often see family caregivers who work, and I know there are about 60% of family caregivers do work, lose income if or when they cut back on hours or have to leave a job to care for an older loved one, and that often jeopardizes things like future job security, career mobility, employment benefits, and retirement savings. One stat, and again, this is in big red box, is that family caregivers age 50 and older who have to leave the workforce to care for a loved one often sustain lifetime income-related losses of more than $300,000. And we do know that 45%, almost half of family caregivers, experience at least one financial setback due to caregiving. We know that those financial stressors can be compounded by the physical and emotional challenges of caregiving. We know that 60% of family caregivers perform more intensive medical and nursing tasks, 20% report high physical strain, 26% have difficulty coordinating care, and 40% rate their caregiving situation as highly stressful. And because of those compounding challenges, we've found that 23% of family caregivers say that family caregiving has made their own health worse. And because the demand for caregiving and the need and those expectations to carry out those more complex medical tasks is really only increasing. And we know that without those the interventions to support family caregivers, all of these challenges they face are going to grow and then put their own health and the health that they care for at risk. So it's something that we're really focused on. The good news here is that there is increased attention on the issue. One of the questions we often hear is exactly where exactly do we even want to begin with this challenge? And in looking at the many challenges that family caregivers face, we see really three overarching areas of focus. So the three things that we really want to address are: how do we make providing care and finding paid care easier for family caregivers? How do we alleviate that economic and financial challenge or strain? And then how do we increase access to services and supports across the spectrum, across those demographics of caregivers, so everyone has access? And I think today, as we all know, of these three areas, our main focus is going to be how we provide some financial relief and alleviate some of those financial challenges. So I want to talk a little bit specifically about the Family Caregiver Tax Credit. We know that financial support can help alleviate those significant, one of the most significant challenges that family caregivers face, which is the financial challenge. And it can help provide relief for those who need it most. One of the ways of accomplishing this is through the Family Caregiver Tax Credit. So that's one of the pieces of that second principle that we really look at, which is alleviating the financial challenges. There's a handful of others, but this is one we've seen really sort of take hold in a number of places. We see it trending, and it is a way that we can sort of figure out, how can we best alleviate some of those challenges. So a few years ago, AARP developed a model bill. This talks a little bit about our model here on this slide. Our model calls for a non-refundable tax credit for eligible expenses, including things like home improvement, equipment, home care aids, respite care, and a few other things. And while the model legislation does have parameters around income and other types of eligibility, it's important to acknowledge that the specifics of this model bill can be adjusted to fit a given state. It's something that we can sort of look at the different aspects that are going on, the different environments, whether it be economic environment of a state, political, or what are the neighbors doing, what else is trending, and we can sort of adjust based on that. Before I move on, I do want to note two important points about the model legislation. The caregiver tax credit we're talking about here is against state taxes. It's not federal, it's a state bill. And then the second piece I want to highlight is this is a credit, not a deduction. And there's a distinction there. So just for anyone who might not know, a deduction reduces the amount of your income that is subject to taxation. A tax credit, like our model, takes the amount of taxes you owe and reduces it dollar for dollar. So it does provide some more financial relief, and it's a little bit more impactful. So that being said, I'm going to move on a little bit to some of the different elements and parameters that we often talk about when we talk about family caregiver tax credits. So the first is the actual credit amount. When we're talking about our model, we're talking about a non-refundable credit of 50% of eligible expenses up to $1,000 maximum credit, and it can be taken yearly. But as I said, some of the ways that we can be flexible with that, I think, we'd obviously like to see the most comprehensive bills possible. We'd like to see it be help as many people as possible with as much as possible. But I know that a number of factors can impact what's feasible and where. So I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about obviously all these elements and then the different ways we can be flexible with the bills. So again, either making it more or less comprehensive or a little bit narrower or wider. We can talk about, what is the maximum amount? What's the percentage? We've seen bills that talk about it as the model with 50%. We've seen some that talk about it with you're eligible for 100% of your expenses up to a certain amount. Obviously, the actual amount, I think I'll talk a little bit about this later, but the state of Georgia has a family caregiver tax credit, but it's very narrowly drawn, and it's for, I think the maximum amount is $150. Up to, we saw in the Oklahoma bill that passed last year, which again, I'm going to talk about a little bit more. the maximum amount was $3,000. So there's a pretty wide range of what's available, what's out there, and what different states can do. As I said, our model bill is also non-refundable, which means that the credit can't be paid back to the taxpayer in the form of a refund check. The credit can bring your liability down to zero, but the state wouldn't give you money beyond that. So just something else to know about the different nuances of the flexibilities and different elements within the bill. The other piece is eligible expenses. This one is a little self-explanatory, so it's what actually what you're paying for is eligible to count towards those expenses. So again, our model includes things like home improvements, assistive technology, home care aids, in-home care aids, respite care, all of those sorts of things. And you can adjust the bill based on, do you want to pull back? Do you want to add more? Are there other things that maybe aren't included that would be really impactful for people living in Alabama that we'd want to add? So that's another piece. We also look at, what does it mean to be an eligible care recipient? So the model bill is someone who is 18 and older, a spouse, parent, partner, in-law, grandparent, grandchild, or someone with or other relations by blood, marriage, such as an aunt, uncle, niece, or nephew. And the way that we can sort of adjust this is, we can adjust age or income of the care recipient, the number of ADLs they might need, 1 to 2 to 3. I think the most common we often see is 1 or 2, but again, things that can be adjusted. And then the eligible caregiver is another piece, right? So our model bill calls for family caregivers earning less than $75,000 a year for an individual or $150,000 for a couple. And it might be worthwhile to adjust that based on what the income is in your state, what the median income is in your state, or what might make the most sense. And some of the ways that we can be flexible here include adjusting that income threshold, expanding the definition to include chosen family or friends. Often we talk about how many adults might not have children or might rely on neighbors, friends, people who they aren't blood related to, but consider family. And so there's a way you can sort of expand that definition to make sure that those family caregivers are included. And then you can also look at other eligibility factors, including age for the caregiver themselves. Those are some of the ways that, the different parameters and the different elements that we look at when we look at a family caregiver tax credit. But I did want to talk a little bit about the existing credits that we see, that we know now. Again, I know I mentioned Georgia's family caregiver tax credit. We also have a handful of others that are more narrowly drawn. So New Jersey has a wounded warrior tax credit that's only eligible for care recipients who are veterans. There's a handful of others here, and I want to take a second to highlight two bills. Beyond tax credits, another thing we often talk about is a reimbursement program, and that is in Arizona. They have a family caregiver grant program, which allows for it's structured in a similar way, but rather than being tied to taxes, it's a grant program, so you're just reimbursed. And the other one I wanted to mention, which is not on this list, is the Oklahoma family caregiver tax credit. This bill passed last year. It is, to our knowledge, the most comprehensive family caregiver tax credit in the country. It allows for expenses up to $2,000 or $3,000 if the care recipient is a veteran or a person with Alzheimer's. I think one of the things that I wanted to highlight here is obviously Oklahoma and Alabama are not similar states, they are different, but I think it's always helpful when we're talking about a more conservative state to highlight what may have been done in another more conservative state. And so I wanted to just sort of underline that Oklahoma, passed this bill that is pretty comprehensive. It's very exciting. There is a cap on the amount of the tax credit of $1.5 million. And I think that was done to sort of allow the state to go back, review, and understand what the actual take-up rate is and have a better understanding of the cost. We do know that there's some discussion of potentially going back in year 3 or 4 to figure out, do we want to raise this cap? What is what are the parameters that we'd like to adjust. So I wanted to highlight this because, again, it is the most comprehensive. It hasn't been enacted yet. It's going to be enacted. It'll be this tax year 2024, so that we'll have more information about this starting next year once we understand and have more information on this tax year. But I wanted to share some of the resources that they circulated just to talk a little bit about the Family Caregiver Tax Credit and you know, the things that are involved there.